Hi everyone, my name is Elena Ramon, and I'm a future Spanish teacher in middle level and secondary ed. My topic for this research project was global competency in a Spanish language classroom, which obviously is what eventually led me to my question: how can global competency aid in language acquisition? I thank you for tuning in, and I hope you learned as much as I've learned during this project. Learning a language has a purpose. Give students a reason and they'll see the importance of language acquisition. This is something that I have seen time and time again to be true. My students are not going to care about learning Spanish if it has no purpose to them. If they see not a reason to learn the language because it's going to help them communicate with their family or it's going to give them easier access to a country they absolutely dream of because that's where their favorite band is from, it's not going to matter to them. One of the quotes that I came across during my research was: the need to communicate with someone of a different language or culture may arise at any time. That's so true. That can be if you go to a different country, which is a little more obvious, or it could be next door, or it could be you going to the grocery store and you need a half pound of ground beef. You never know when the need to communicate with somebody of a different language comes up. Knowing more than one language prepares one to know how, when, and why to say what to whom. I believe that by researching global competency in a Spanish language classroom, I'll also come across strategies for PBL or project based learning assessments and other ways for students to acquire language while also following the national standards for foreign languages 5Cs: communication, cultures, connections, comparisons, and communities. So it was quite a journey into this research topic, but one of the progresses that I made in my own understanding of the implementation of global competency in my classroom was that out of the many strategies I read about, the one in the VIF website that stood out to me, which is something that I originally wanted to study anyway, was project based learning, or as they refer to it on the website, project based inquiry. So I decided to look further into it to realistically see how I could implement it in my classroom. Hike describes 4 rules to a PBL classroom. 1. Learning spaces help set the tone. 2. Think information access. 3. Use technology with purpose. And 4. See yourself as the ultimate resource. Well, that's all well and good, but how do I transfer that into my globally competent classroom? So far, I see it this way. Learning spaces. Rule number 1. What this means is that I will transform my classroom to reflect various Spanish speaking cultures. There will be pictures of local Spanish speaking community members and or events. There will be pictures of real people and sites from Spanish speaking countries. Animals, music, celebrations, anything that can be representative of authentic Spanish speaking cultures. I will include these in my classroom. The atmosphere must help transfer them into the culture as much as they can so that students can begin to feel comfortable in the environment and ideally be more receptive to language acquisitions through ACTFL's 5Cs. Of course, the end goal is for students to be able to also feel comfortable in a real world setting, which is what I would be aiming for. Rule number 2: information access. This will be made available through the internet mostly, depending on the student project, but there are many neighborhoods that are predominantly Spanish speaking and even specific to certain Latino regions. Think Pilsen, Humboldt Park, Little Village, etc. Um, these are helpful for students so that they'll be able to immerse themselves into the culture and then find the answers that they're inquiring about for their project. Rule number 3: technology is an excellent tool, giving my students access to resources they would otherwise not have. However, other technological resources can be found in music, films, video editing, depending on the student project, and presentations as a final assessment. Another excellent tool that would benefit my students would be a regular conversation with native Spanish speakers from across the globe via applications such as Skype or WeSpeak. Of course, these would come with some difficulties such as parental permission, monitoring for age appropriate interactions, etc. This is just an idea, but perhaps a solution could be to set up a collaboration with another school in a native Spanish speaking country where Twice a week, their students could speak with ours, once in Spanish and once in English. This is for mutual benefit in practicing the language. Again, there are some challenges, but those can be worked out later in the development process. Bum, ba-da-dum, ba-ba-bum. Rule number 4, the ultimate resource, aka me. I was lucky to have been raised not only bilingual but multicultural as well, meaning that I was raised here in the US and my whole life has been here. I went to the schools here. The movies that I watched were Hollywood movies here. But that being said, I was also raised with a very big influence of Honduran and Ecuadorian culture, the food, the Christmas traditions, the music, what have you. So, in many ways, my students will have similar experiences to those that I have already had, peer pressure and going through an emo, goth, punk phase, what have you. So, students, I think, will benefit from anecdotes as much as they will from my own competency in language because it'll help develop the rapport we need to open up to language and to an extent, cultural acquisition. Adding this to the fact that I try to extend my services to many cultural nonprofits in the city, I believe there are many resources and connections I have collected that could aid my students in their PBI or PBL. So, what else comes up when thinking of being globally competent learners? Authentic materials. As a teacher, that popped up right away. So I'm not talking about translated text copied for my students, but rather pieces that not only use the target language, but also depend on cultural context for deeper understanding. I'm always an advocate for students reaching out to their neighborhoods and communities in search of for native speakers for practice. But it's also important for them to take into account experience and how it shapes language. Take, for example, a study on dialects and the various changes in word definitions based on regions. Students would be hard pressed not to find that one word means something in Central America and yet means something completely different in South America, or perhaps doesn't even exist at all in Mexico or any sort of combination of these. One person, the teacher, will not always know the answer to questions on regional language, especially if they're not completely familiar with that particular location's language. But imagine how much easier it would be to explain meaning and significance from a person who is completely comfortable using certain vocabulary because that's what they grew up with. Why are bananas called minimos in Honduras, yet this word means minimum in other countries that refer to bananas as banana or banano or even plátano? Just as an example to kind of see what I mean about all this, why are bananas called minimos in Honduras? Well, it all dates back to the presence of the United Fruit Company in Honduras and their size requirements for bananas in order to comply with aesthetic demands. Bananas had to meet a minimum size requirement and mostly for verbal shorthand were from there on out referred to as the minimum or el mínimo. That's why you're not going to hear the word mínimo referring to bananas in any other country except for Honduras, and even then, mostly in the capital city. So, coming back to learning through authentic sources, what this does is it helps students to communicate their ideas effectively and with diverse audiences, including speakers of the target language. It helps them recognize their own and others' perspectives through understanding and comparing the similarities and differences between their mother language and culture and the world language and culture they are studying. It helps them to investigate the world beyond their immediate environment by using all of the critical thinking skills from other disciplines such as social studies, science, math, and the arts. It helps them to translate their ideas and findings into appropriate actions to improve conditions by taking their language skills out into the community and the world, both in person and through technology. All of these are excellent motivators to learning the language because it now serves a purpose beyond learning just for a grade. So, when I refer to ACTFL or the national standards for foreign language education, what I mean is communication, which stresses the use of language for communication in real life situations. It emphasizes what students can do with language rather than what they know about language, and students are asked to communicate in all forms, interpret, and show cultural understandings when they communicate. They present these in oral and written information to different audiences for a variety of purposes, say a presentation on Cuba to parents during parent weekend or something like that. Cultures, which is an important part of world language education because it helps um, develop a better understanding and appreciation of the relationship between languages and other cultures, as well as the student's native culture. Students become better able to understand other people's points of views, ways of life, and contributions to the world. Connections. World language instruction must be connected to other subject areas. Content from other subject areas is integrated with world language instruction through lessons that are developed around common themes. Comparisons. Students are encouraged to compare and contrast language and cultures. All right, so this one. They discover patterns, make predictions, and analyze similarities and differences across languages and cultures. In the end, students are usually able to better understand their own native language and culture because of these comparisons. And finally, communities, my personal favorite one. So, extending learning experiences from the world language classroom to the home and multicultural, multilingual community emphasizes living in a global society, living in the world that we live in, right? So, this can be done with field trips, email, the internet, clubs, foreign exchange program, cultural activities, and the opportunity to hear speakers of other language in the school and in the classroom. And if you notice anything, global competency hits them all 5 C's. So I took it upon myself to look for ACTFL's position statement on global competency. Um, as you can see right here, the means to achieve global competence, which is one, recognize multiplicity of factors, two, investigate and explain cultural differences as well as similarities, three, examine events through the lens of media from different countries and cultures, four, collaborate, and five, reflect on one's personal experiences across cultures to evaluate personal feelings, thoughts, perceptions, and reactions. Again, global competency and ACTFL's 5 C's, uh, they interact so perfectly, and using a strategy like PBL incorporates all of these. It's almost like they were meant to hold hands, right? So this is where I leave you. Thank you again for joining me, and I think I'm gonna have to put this quote up on my door or on my desk or anywhere because it so beautifully summarizes everything that I've learned with this research project. Mansouri says, proficiency in another language is a key component of global competence, but second language proficiency does not guarantee global competence. This is something that I will always try to remember and always try to strive for, and I hope you will too. Thanks.